Unnatural Selection, an Eternal Crusade short story by McNeill. Fan-made audiobook read by Lorehammer Library. Noxious purple mist clung to the rocks, leaving a glistening residue that was sticky to the touch. Sergeant Castor stood and wiped his fingertips on the discoloured leaves of tall grass lining the gravelled path. Little more than a goat herd's trail from the high peaks of the mountain to the few settlements clustered on its median slopes. It had been travelled recently, but not by the goat herd or his animals.
"Tyranid?"
asked Heller, his heavy bolter slung low at his waist. The rest of Castor's ultramarines, 8 battle brothers and 4 scouts in the cobalt blue armour and gold trim of the 2nd Company, awaited his verdict. Castor nodded.
"Without doubt. They're near,"
said Gudrick Scraymere, bent low over the path further down the slope. A fetish-hung shotgun and an ice-rimmed axe were hung crosswise at his shoulders. The Space Wolf's helm was slung at his belt, and his resin-stiffened hair was spiked behind him like an ocean predator's fin. His braided beard was threaded with beads and bone, making him look like some feral world shaman, as did the many tattoos curling over his cheeks and forehead. He drew in great lungfuls of tainted air, as he all but belly-crawled over the rocks, like a stalking predator.
"A blind man could see that, Fenris-born,"
said Scout Sergeant Vario, his gaze never once leaving the scope of his sniper rifle. He scanned the sectors behind and to their flank, as his 3 scouts completed the watch circle. Vario's disdain at Gudrick's methods was clear, but the warrior hadn't yet steered them wrong.
"Aye, that he could,"
replied Gudrick, springing to his feet and spitting a mouthful of phlegm.
"Which begs the question of why Castor here asked me to join your pretty band." "Because wolf sense is keener than any sight of ours,"
said Castor, before Vario could retort.
"Let that speak for itself."
Vario shrugged, unwilling to concede, but knowing better than to show dissent before outsiders.
"I fought alongside the wolves on HR4, continued Castor. "Their warriors led us true when no others could, when even Telion lost his way."
The younger scouts drew in startled breaths at so unlikely a scenario, but Castor had seen it with his own eyes. Trapped within the industrially scabbed surface of HR4, surrounded by maddened tyrannic organisms with no line of retreat, only a lone wolf whose name Castor never learned had found a route to the surface. "What makes you so sure the beasts are establishing a hive, anyway?"
"I've seen this pattern of behaviour before,"
said Castor.
"On Armageddon, when tyrannic organisms lose their synaptic connection to the hive mind, they revert to base instinctual desires. They nest, they hunt, and essentially behave exactly like animals. The attack on the communications array was not the work of animals,"
grunted Heller.
"Too well coordinated to be random."
"And it wasn't the only one," said Castor.
"Which means there is likely to be a hive trying to form somewhere in these mountains."
"Does Protus agree?" said Vario, nodding towards the summit of the mountain, where Castor's fellow sergeant held the communications array that they so recently relieved.
"He will,"
said Castor. Gudrick led them from the path and across a scree-covered slope of broken stone and gravel. Cold winds blew from the high valleys, yet the acrid mist stubbornly clung to the slope, as if leaking from somewhere far below. Despite his best efforts, Castor's every step sent avalanches of fist-sized rocks tumbling downhill. Gudrick moved without leaving so much as a footstep to mark his passage. Patches of rough gorse and sickly bracken dotted the slope, hardy grasses sickening with unnatural toxins. More proof, were proof needed, that the mountains were host to something obscenely alien. The Space Wolf held up a fist, and the ultramarines halted, keeping low to the ground and readying their weapons. Godric sniffed the air, then closed his eyes and bent to press his ear to the rocks. His lips moved in a wordless oath, known to the huntsmen all across the ice of Fenris. The Space Wolf's eyes flicked open, and Caster saw his yellow irises flare. Godric bared his fangs, focusing his gaze upon a cluster of rocks 30 metres ahead. At first, Caster thought the wolf was mistaken. Then he saw undulant forms moving in the mist. Too many and too occluded by the rocks to get a reliable count. At least a dozen, but likely more. Glossy carapaces, sliced with blade impacts. Grotesque, bulbous heads filled with tearing fangs, bodies rippling with scythe-edged hook limbs. Hormagaunts. A surge of battle stims gathered in Caster's system, ready to instantly transition him from rest to combat readiness. The creatures appeared to be unaware of their presence, too fixated on something obscured in the mist. Vario and his scouts had their sniper rifles at the ready, and Hellar held his hand over the firing mechanism of the heavy bolter.
"Wait,"
said Godric.
"These won't be the only ones."
Caster nodded. He'd already begun quartering the landscape to find another swarm.
"There,"
said Vario, aiming his rifle at a host of shapes moving along a partially hidden riverbed, streaming with frothed alien vapours and roaring with the sound of an unseen waterfall. Below them.
"Another swarm pack,"
said Godric.
2 score creatures at least. The first group are outriders, guardian creatures."
"Then what are they guarding?" said Caster, adjusting the filters on his auto-senses to better penetrate the fog wreathing the stream bed. Immediately he saw Godric's assessment of their numbers was conservative. At least 40, with something larger at their centre. He consulted his eidetic recall of currently codified tyrannic organisms, but came up empty. The beast's misshapen form was a gestalt hybrid of pallid flesh, chitinous plates, vestigial pseudopod limbs, and bowed legs, swollen to elephantine proportions.
"What in the name of Guilliman is that?"
hissed Caster.
"You're the prodigy of Cassius,"
said Hellar.
"You tell me."
Caster glanced over at Godric, who shrugged and said,
"Not anything I've ever seen, which is a good enough reason to kill it as any."
The creature's ruggedly ovoid skull was distended, but not with any natural growth patterns. Its shape was uneven, rugose with tumours, and misshapen with uncontrolled mutation. No, not uncontrolled. Unconsciously accelerated. Competence without comprehension.
"Hyper-evolution,"
said Caster, thinking back to a beast Chaplain Cassius had described killing in the frozen reaches of Armageddon's polar wastes. A creature likewise afflicted by a myriad hideous cranial mutations.
"What?"
said Godric. Caster's mind raced as he articulated his theory, just as it formed in his mind.
"The swarm needs to establish a connection to the overmind,"
said Caster.
"And in response to isolation, their gene strands trigger mutations in each iteration of creatures. They cycle through a host of evolutionary avenues in a massively compressed time period, hoping to eventually hit upon the required mutation that causes hive synapses to form."
The Space Wolf grinned and racked his shotgun.
"Then let's make this an evolutionary dead end, eh?"
Caster picked his target, a creature with one eye socket that was little more than a sliced ruin. Across the iron sights of his bolter, the wound appeared to have been caused by a claw. Internecine conflict brought about by territoriality? An avenue to explore at a later date, but Caster would settle for simply killing the beast just now.
"2 volleys, advance to Cull,"
said Caster.
"On my mark."
Affirmative icons appeared on his visor, almost instantaneously. Godric just nodded.
"Mark,"
said Caster. The mountainside lit up as 8 mass reactives punched into the Guardian swarm. Armor-piercing tips blasted through the organic plates of the Hormagaunts and exploded within them. Screeching cries echoed from the mountainside. Shugging blasts from Hellar's flanking heavy bolter ripped across the Hormagaunts. enfilading the line of alien monsters. Caster saw at least 6 explode in quick succession. Vario's scouts felled 4 more with silent spits from their sniper rifles, and Gudric's shotgun cratered a Hormagaunt's thorax into a jellied mass of shredded meat. A second volley tore through the beasts, and more alien creatures collapsed to the rocks. The Ultramarines split into 2 combat squads, the first led by Caster, the second by Vario. Caster ran crouched low, keeping his bolter aimed into the smoking mass of ruptured flesh and bone. The iron sight slipped left and right, but nothing remained alive. Gudric moved effortlessly ahead of him, moving over the loose rocks with inhuman agility. A youth spent in an inconstant void of ice and ever-shifting landscapes had given him preternatural balance. Caster vaulted the rocks in which the tyranid creatures had concealed themselves. He scanned for threats. Gudric stamped down on the alien skull, then spun and brought the butt of his shotgun down on another with a faultless economy of lethality. The Hormagaunt, missing its body below the thorax, writhed in a morass of pulped entrails. Even in death it sought to kill him. Caster didn't break stride, shooting it in the head as he passed.
"Clear!"
he shouted, as Gudric sliced the lower jaw from a spasming creature and slung it from his shoulder guard. The scouts took position on the rocks as Vario and Caster led the combat squads down to the riverbed. The pack below had increased speed, screeching and bounding towards the revealed waterfall. Only the lumbering creature at their centre kept them from simply leaping beyond the reach of the vengeful Space Marines. Only now did Caster see how large this pack truly was. At least 50 beasts, broad of shoulder and sinewy of limb, with elongated hook claws and curled dew claws, brutes of the genus, and powerful killers.
"Don't let them reach the waterfall,"
shouted Gudric. Caster was about to question that when he saw the outline of a cave entrance behind its thundering waters. The arcologies of Arcona were rumoured to be unfathomably deep and curiously resistant to cartography. Any creatures that reached the darkness beneath the world would never be seen again. A narrow gorge of scum-frothed water, churned with toxins and bioacids at the base of the falls. At its centre was a spur of black rock, scummed and pitted by corrosive acids.
"Hela, Vario, pin the pack in place," ordered Caster. "Circle sweep to kill. Gudric with me. I will go high, you follow in the water. We shall meet in the centre."
The Space Wolf grinned as he saw what Caster intended.
"We shall be as the hunters of the Hrosvalar,"
he yelled, leaping into the pool and howling with feral glee. More gunfire blazed through the purple mist behind Caster and Gudric. Mass reactives raked the riverbed, and sniper fire punched through skull after skull. Fully half the pack had turned to engage the suppressing Ultramarines. Caster ran along the edge of the gorge, gaining height with every powered step. Below him, the Fenrisian clove the water like a blade, his shotgun firing into the escaping tyranids with relentless precision. The ground continued to rise, and Caster suddenly veered to the side. He leapt from the edge of the gorge and landed on a tall spur of rock in the centre of the pool without missing a stride. 30 metres below, 24 Hormagaunts surrounded the synapse mutant. It bludgeoned a path through the water, keening in blind animal panic as it sought to reach safety. Caster sprinted to the edge of the spur, drawing his combat blade and hurling himself from the rock. He slammed down hard on the mutant beast's shoulder plates. It screeched in anger and bucked with the colossal impact, rolling its chitin-armoured skull. Slick with biosecretions, Caster had no chance of keeping hold, but he had no intention of remaining on its back. Caster slid clear, rolling onto his front and punching his combat blade into the bony shield of armour plating at his neck. He swung his legs around, using the momentum of his enormous weight to drag the creature down with him. The mutant beast's knees bucked as Caster hauled it over the centre of its balance. They crashed down, throwing up a tsunami of polluted water as its malformed skull hit the water like a ploughshare. Castor was thrown clear, fighting a fleeting disorientation as he fought to get his legs under him. He rose from the waist-deep pool, combat blade in hand, as the mutant beast reared up in a cascade of dark water. Its Hormagaunt protectors threw themselves at him. He killed the first with a blade thrust through the jaw, the second with an elbow smash. A third died with its throat ripped out in its fist, a fourth with its hissing face pulped by a crashing headbutt. Claws raked his armour, envenomed fangs skidded over his visor, and biotoxins burned the ceramite of his battle plate. The water churned with alien blood as Castor fought with every weapon, every limb. He broke bones, smashed skulls open, calling upon every lesson taught by Cassius's tyranid hunters to slay this vile foe. A ululating howl echoed from the sides of the gorge, even the tyrannic monsters pausing in their assault at the terrifying sound. Castor looked up and saw Gudrick Scrymere, haloed in the light of the sun. Like Castor before him, he leapt from the spur of rock, having climbed it from within the pool. But where Castor had only sought to delay and pin the beast in place, the Fenrisborn aimed to deliver the death blow. His ice-rimmed axe glittered with killing light as it swung for the synapse mutant's neck. Frost-forged steel split the unclean flesh of the mutant creature, cleaving meat and bone like the softest clay. No executioner ever swung a finer blow. No butcher ever made a deeper cut. The monster's head screeched, even as Gudrick sheared it from its body, and black blood jetted from the stump. It crashed into the water, bloated limbs thrashing as its nervous system died. The Hormagaunts died with it, shrieking in pain as synaptic feedback ripped their imperfectly linked minds apart. The space wolf landed in the water beside Castor, his stiffened hair hanging lank at his cheeks. A huge grin split his face, and his fangs were red where he'd chewed his lip bloody.
"A good kill, Brother Gudrick,"
said Castor.
"Chaplain Cassius would have approved."
"A slaying worthy of telling by the scouts, Brother Castor," agreed the Fenrisian with a booming laugh.
"And that leap of yours, we'll make a skyclaw out of you yet."
Phenomenal, you wish you were. I am the best I ever been. I tried to be the best of men. You know. Some support by my side could have been